Thanks very much, Mary, and all of the gang. Lovely to see everybody. Happy New Year. So I'll get stuck in. Mary asked me to give an update on the UK-EU trade and cooperation agreement. What I'm going to do, I did a Twitter thread on this. God knows how, it feels like a very long time ago now, indeed, but it probably wasn't that long ago. What I'm going to do is just sort of elaborate a little bit on some of the issues and add a bit more detail and some more examples onto the main themes in that Twitter thread. I know that Worldwide Wednesdays are very, very keen on everything being 5 points. So as usual, I'll do this in 5 points. It's always a nice challenge to see if I can organize it in that way. So for the first point, very brief introductory point. This is a gigantic document. I've read it now twice. I can still barely remember more than a handful of provisions at a time. It is absolutely enormous. It is incredibly complicated. It's full of really detailed and specialist issues. And to be frank, I don't really know or care very much about the details of fishing quotas for mackerel and herring. I don't really know or care very much about all sorts of things to do with road haulage permits. They're not of any particular interest to me. My interest is in the big picture of EU-UK relations looking forward, not in the minutiae and detail of some of the things which have dogged the negotiations and maybe attracted disproportionate attention in the press. So that's my introductory qualification. This is about what I find interesting and important, and hopefully, since I'm a big picture constitutionalist, it's of more interest to other people as well. Second main point is that from that big picture perspective, we should give a certain degree of credit where credit's due and look at some of the positives of this agreement, because there are a few. It's better than being kicked in the face. This deal is better than being slapped around. It's better than being mugged in an alleyway. It's better than having your house burgled. There are certain benefits to this deal. It has to be said, none of the benefits are things that we didn't enjoy already as member states of the EU, watered down, taken in isolation in a very ad hoc, limited, and often very partial way. But they are still better than a kick in the face. So for example, it is good that we won't end up having to idly pay 40% tariffs on certain imports. It's good that we won't have to idly pay 15% tariffs on other imports. It's good that there will still be, and I think this is one of the issues which has really not been covered very well at all in the press. I actually think the security cooperation provisions of this treaty are more important than the economic and trade provisions, or at least of equal importance, and yet they're barely mentioned. But it is good that there will still be some degree of framework for security cooperation between the EU and the UK. I was very relieved to see that we will still be able to have emergency healthcare provision under this agreement, and I've already done my application today for the new global health insurance card. It's worth noting that the global health insurance card actually covers less countries than the European health insurance card, but never mind, it's still better than having to take out private health insurance when you go on holiday. So that's my second point. There are a limited number of benefits to this agreement. It is better than watching your house burn down and all of your possessions being uninsured. Third key point is, of course, what much more important than what this treaty offers is what it doesn't offer. Compared to no deal, it's better than a kick in the face, but compared to what we had as members of the EU, it is at best a thin pale shadow, and in many situations, it is totally worthless, in fact, virtually interchangeable with no deal whatsoever. So for example, we know there will be significant border controls and customs bureaucracy, adding significant costs and burdens on the businesses on both sides of the Channel and the Irish Sea. We know that there will be no more mutual market access based on mutual recognition for goods, for services. There will be significant barriers and market closures. We know that there is no more free movement of natural, the most minimal provisions on short-term travel, unilaterally as regards tourists, bilaterally as regards short-term business purposes. There'll be no more Erasmus for university students, except for universities in Northern Ireland, which I just find totally inconceivable. I really find it very difficult to believe that this was a positive policy objective of the UK government. And equally, there'll be no more structured cooperation in the entire field of foreign security and defence policy. The UK government simply said it was not interested in having structured dialogues with the EU in these crucial fields of security, foreign policy and defence. So much more important than what this treaty actually provides is all of the things that it doesn't. This was the type of extremist Brexit that even a lunatic like Nigel Farage once said was never anybody's goal or objective. And yet it is exactly the type of extremist lunatic Brexit which we've ended up with under the Johnson government. And I'll just make a little digression here to Sajad. I think one of the key challenges for the future of the UK is for mainstream conservatives to get back control of their party from the lunatic fringe who've basically overtaken it. It's not healthy for any Western democracy to not have a mainstream centre-right party which is capable of offering a programme for government alongside a mainstream left-wing party which is capable of offering a programme for government. It's just not healthy. It's not healthy. I would never vote Conservative in my life, but it's important that there is a mainstream centre-right party capable of offering the country some sort of alternative future and competing on that basis with the mainstream of the centre-left. And I think one of the main challenges that mainstream conservatives face, and to be frank, we should be helping mainstream conservatives in that goal, is to wrest back control of the Conservative Party from the Looney Tunes who've currently overtaken it. Anyway, small digression. Point number 4. I'll say a few words which are about an issue of particular legal interest and importance, actually great importance for all of us. Because so far what I've said is that the substantive content of this new treaty is really just scraps from the table. That's all it is. It's scraps from the table of EU membership. Otherwise, it is the mass removal of rights, the mass suppression of freedoms, the mass destruction of benefits and opportunities to be replaced only with barriers, costs, closures, losses, and dashed hopes and dreams. However, those substantive elements are greatly magnified, and I really stress those words, greatly magnified by the legal status and legal effects of this agreement as a matter of international and domestic law. If we take 2 steps back and think about how the EU operates, what the EU does is when it creates rights and obligations, they are not just rights and obligations for the governments of the member states or for the institutions of the EU itself. When the EU creates rights and obligations, they are rights and obligations for us as individuals, as citizens, as businesses. And if somebody infringes our rights under EU law, we are entitled to vindicate our rights on our own behalf, on our own account, at our own initiative, ultimately by going to a court, either in our home country or in any other member state, and insisting that our rights have to be respected and upheld. Basically, EU law operates on the basis that disputes should not be confrontations between sovereign powers. Disputes should be about individual right holders asserting their rights and having swift and effective means of enjoying what they were intended to enjoy. Under this new treaty, even the meager rights and obligations which it actually contains are not rights for anybody as individuals. None of us as individuals, as businesses, as citizens have any rights enforceable under this treaty. The rights and obligations are purely for the UK and the EU under international law as international actors. And if things go wrong, they have to be put right purely using those international and diplomatic means which are foreseen under the treaty. We as individuals can do nothing about it. We can't vindicate what we thought we were entitled to. We can't go to court and defend ourselves if our intended rights are somehow infringed. In other words, instead of the relatively sophisticated and ultimately pretty civilized EU system of treating people as people, what this treaty does is revert to the old system of international relations, whereby we as individuals mean nothing and we have no particular rights or status of our own. And the resolution of disputes becomes purely a bilateral matter between governments, a matter of essentially international relations and realpolitik. We saw what that looks like in the Trump-China trade war. Huh? That's what it looks like in the brute, nasty, real world of how trade wars operate, whereby you retaliate against each other's economy for real or perceived slights by setting out to deliberately destroy the lives of innocent people who have nothing to do with your actual dispute. That's the type of agreement that we're looking at here. So not only is Brexit an exercise in the mass deprivation of rights and the segregation of economies and security cooperation on a scale that the modern world has never seen before, it's also a mass disenfranchisement of us as individual citizens and the alienation of our legal rights and protections from what we had before. It's really, really, really quite astounding. Fifth and final point. Of course, the government wants us to see only what this agreement contains and ignore all of the things that it takes away. But the government, I think, is trying to do more than that. The government's hoping, I suppose, that we're just going to forget the whole wider context of the Brexit process, of which this treaty is just one element and certainly not the final element by any stretch of the imagination. They want us to forget that through the actions of the Johnson government, we are seeing really profound and long-term damage to the influence of the UK within Europe and therefore within the world. And that's to say nothing about the serious reputational damage which has been done by the UK by the frankly law-breaking actions and plans of the Johnson government, who has shown as little respect for the rule of law as Donald Trump. And I don't think any of us should be pompous about the Americans and their problems. In many respects, Boris Johnson did worse than Trump ever managed to do, because at least there are certain constitutional protections in the US which simply don't apply in the UK. We shouldn't forget also the really terrible divisions which have been left behind in the wake of Brexit. The situation of Scotland is critical. The situation in Wales, which you'll hear about more next week, I suppose, is also very depressing. The situation in Northern Ireland is frankly a scandal. And of course, we just have a legacy of terrible social tensions and anger and bitterness across the population as a whole. And we shouldn't forget some of the other consequences which have already been created by Brexit, and again, which aren't going away. The treatment of EU nationals has been utterly scandalous, and I will never, ever forgive this government for what it's done to my fellow citizens and friends and family. But equally, the treatment of UK citizens across the EU has been an almost equally scandalous affair, to say nothing about the total indifference towards stability in Northern Ireland and the treatment of the UK's own citizens as well as Irish citizens there. And of course, that's to say nothing about the whole fiasco of undermining democracy by systematizing lies and propaganda and denigrating expertise and undermining Parliament and attacking the courts and blah-de-blah and blah-de-blah and blah-de-blah. The list goes on. The problem is that this draft treaty does nothing to address or repair any of those profoundly damaging phenomena which we've all lived through over the past several years. And no amount of Boris Johnson blowing his own trumpet about his great new Brexit treaty, his great new trade agreement, is actually going to repair or undo all of that terrible damage. There is a very significant proportion of this population who will never forgive the Conservatives for what they've done. And again, I'm afraid that's a challenge for mainstream conservatism to overcome that really profound social and political hostility. And it is hostility. So what do I think of Boris Johnson's deal? It's better than being mugged. It's better than having your house burnt down. It's better than an earthquake destroying your home. It is better than all of those things. But compared to EU membership, it's a pathetic little nothing. That's the long and short of it. It's a pathetic little nothing. And it will do nothing to undo all of the other damage which has been wrought upon this country by the mismanagement of the past 5 years. It's really depressing to see the reaction, of course, of your average Brexit supporter and the right-wing press, which simply papers over all of these issues and problems as if they've been resolved. My worry is things are going to get a lot worse before we see any hope of them getting any better. And I'm afraid that's not just to do with COVID, that's to do with a lot of other things as well. So sorry to have a New Year's depressing message for everybody. Mary knows that although a very jolly person. My messages are almost entirely depressing. But anyway, I hope it's not been too bad.